The Fort Erie Podcast with Brent Jones. Brent Jones starts now.
This is episode 70 of the Fort Erie Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Brent Jones. It is Tuesday, October 3rd, 2023. Coming up shortly, I'm going to be speaking with Detective Sergeant Ray Aceti from Niagara Regional Police. Sergeant Aceti works at the fraud unit, and he's going to share with listeners some popular scams and how you can protect yourself and your family from falling victim to fraud. And then later in today's episode, I'm going to have a second guest, Megan Muir of Muir Image Photography, will be joining me. If you aren't familiar with Meg, she relocated her photography business from St. Catharines to Ridgeway in the not too distant past. But a funny thing happened I wanted to share. While Meg and I were nailing down the day and time that we were going to speak, we were emailing back and forth. And one of the times she replied to me, she said in the email that she remembered to email me back because she saw somebody walking down the street that apparently looked like me. And all I said in response was, poor guy. That sucks for him if he has to look like me. But I didn't really think a whole lot about it. But then my wife had our daughter at swim lessons not long after that at the Boys and Girls Club. And our daughter, Ellie, got distracted. From the pool area, you can look through the glass into kind of that main lobby foyer area. My wife said there was somebody out there who apparently looked a lot like me, apparently looked just like me. My wife said he had a similar build, height, complexion, hair. She said on a quick glance, she's like, yeah, it could have passed for you. And it seemed to have distracted Ellie, which all this got me thinking. Now my wife is confirming that she's seen somebody around town here that looks similar to me. So I'm wondering, do I have a doppelganger out there in the town of Fort Erie? Listeners, I'm asking you, have you seen my twin walking around town? If you are my twin, are you listening to this podcast right now? Somebody call the Byrd Box. Let me know if you've seen another Brent Jones walking around the town of Fort Erie. I'd love to hear about it. 289-599-2973. But I did what one does. I decided to do a quick Google search about doppelgangers. And I found this very interesting article about Canadian photographer Francois Brunel. And I'm just going to read from the article here. It says he began an international search for these lookalikes 23 years ago. And ever since, his mission has been to document and photograph as many doppelgangers as possible. What culminates from all those years of hard work and dedication is a project titled I'm Not a Lookalike, a stunning expose on identity, relationships, and what it truly means to be a doppelganger. Now, I'm looking at some of the photos included in this article, and this is just incredible. Like, two people who presumably are not biologically related next to each other, one could pass for the other. It's like a Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen movie from the 1990s where the plot always involved them somehow switching roles at some point in the movie. One of these people could pass for the other in any of these photos. It's incredible. The article goes on to say what's truly gripping about these portraits is the time and effort it took to create them. After searching for these doppelgangers for over 2 decades, Brunel has amassed a massive collection spanning over 250 lookalikes from over 30 cities around the world. I think that's wild that there are that many people. I guess you assume if we have a population of like 8 billion people in the world, there's bound to be at least a few that look similar, but 250 lookalikes from over 30 cities he's found so far over 23 years. I think it's crazy. I think of it like a video game. Like, it would be wild to bump into your own doppelganger somewhere and like see a mirror image of yourself. I feel like if it were a video game, you'd have to fight.
Round 1, fight.
You'd be like, there can only be one, and you'd have to settle it once and for all.
Flawless victory.
Anyway, if you see my doppelganger Fort Erie, make sure to let me know. Let's move on. Let's check in with the Byrd Box and see what kind of messages you guys have left for me this week.
It's Fort Erie's answering machine, the Byrd Box.
This is the Byrd Box. It's Fort Erie's answering machine. You can call it 24 hours a day. You can squawk about anything you like. You can respond to something you heard on the show. You can report something you saw around town. Tell me a joke. Tell me a riddle. Ask me a question. It really doesn't matter. You can call Fort Erie for any reason that you want. It's totally up to you. In fact, this first caller was calling in response to the shawarma fight I did on the previous episode number 69. She decided to give Osmos a try. I crowned Osmos king of the shawarmas here in the town of Fort Erie, and she just has a quick tip for listeners. Check it out.
Osmos is become one of my favorite places to eat, but I wish I had known that I would need a box of tissue to eat the hot slice. If you'd like, I highly recommend starting with the medium before trying hot.
What's the box of tissues for, man? Don't you just I'm guessing for sweat, you don't just like wipe your brow with your sleeve like the rest of us? You're like too hoity-toity for that. I don't know. But anyway, she's absolutely right. Medium spicy is more than enough for most people. I love punishment. Like, I love heat. I love spice. So when I go, I do order it hot. I like my food hot. I like it spicy. The dude behind the counter thought I was making a mistake. Like, the first time I went in there, and I said, I'll take it hot. He said, no, sir, you don't want it hot. He gave me a sample on like a little stick or something so that I could try it. And I was fine with it. It was good. I can't say that I've ever ordered something that was so spicy that I didn't eat it or didn't enjoy it. I can't think of any examples in my life, to be honest. The closest might be Forget About It wings at Trailside. Close, but I love them. I'll eat the whole order. I don't care. The spice does not bother me. But yeah, for most people, I think they'll be surprised at how spicy medium spicy actually is. Start there, as she suggests. I think that's a good idea. And next caller has some thoughts on horoscopes. Check it out.
Horoscope. It is to me entertainment, and I don't take it seriously. I know some people read it, believe it, and follow it daily to see what to expect throughout the course of their day. They must experience a lot of disappointment.
I would believe in horoscopes if they gave me the winning lottery numbers, or if horoscopes started telling ordinary citizens to drop off money at my doorstep. That would be cool. Then yeah, horoscopes all day. But to me, horoscopes are not so different than crystals and tea leaves and palm reading and all the rest of it. I actually think this caller was responding to a feature I did a few episodes ago, kind of poking fun at my own horoscope for the month. But look, people are always looking for special meaning in something. They're looking for direction, and hey, whatever. If horoscopes are your thing or somebody else's, I mean, that's cool. Believe in whatever you want. I'm just not going to join you. And anyway, this last call I'm going to play, I actually played it last episode. It's an excerpt from a call from the previous episode, a call from a concerned citizen about the rise in scams, especially online scams that he's seeing. Let me just play it again to give you a quick refresher here.
I'm just worried about, some people that are more susceptible and that it would really hurt to be scammed out of the money. I might even want to engage like our local police for further advice.
Well, sir, that is exactly what I did. Coming up in just a moment is going to be my conversation with Detective Sergeant Ray Aceti. And Sergeant Aceti is going to share with listeners here some common scams he's seeing, not just in the town of Fort Erie, but across Niagara region as a whole. He, of course, represents Niagara Regional Police, not our town specifically. But nonetheless, he's going to share some common scams and fraud that he's seeing going on, as well as what folks can do in our town to keep themselves safe. So let's get into that right now.
Have something you want to squawk about? Let the whole town know what's on your mind. Call the Byrd Box at 289-599-2973. That's 289-599-BYRD.
All right, joining me on the phone right now, I've got Detective Sergeant Ray Aceti. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Hey, thank you for making time to speak with me today. I appreciate that. Well, how long have you been in law enforcement, and how long specifically with the fraud unit?
So I've been a police officer for 25 years, and over the last 3 years, I've been assigned as the Detective Sergeant in charge of the Niagara Regional Police Fraud Unit. Currently, we have 7 detectives that work in our unit, and we're responsible for investigating financial crimes, including fraud, across the Niagara region.
Now, with a lot of this fraud you've been seeing over the past 3 years, let's say, is that mostly happening online now, or is a lot of this still happening in person?
Well, definitely technology has provided a opportunity. Not only has it provided us with great advances, but online fraud, or even via telecommunication, via telephone, is one of the sort of primary entry point for fraudsters to use in order to connect with individuals.
So when the kinds of reports that you see coming, I assume that things get reported to you by private citizens, you investigate from there. Could you share an example of maybe a common online fraud or scam that you're seeing happening right now?
I can speak specifically about one type of crime which we've seen sort of a new twist to in sort of 2022. There is the famous emergency scam, also referred to as grandparent scam, where individuals are reaching out to victims. It's actually a national problem we're seeing these trends right across the country where individuals are reaching out to elderly persons and creating a bit of a storyline where their family member, their loved one, is in some sort of emergency situation and requires them to immediately act. Now, in the past, these sorts of trends, like I said, it's an age-old scam that's happening, but every from time to time, they sort of reinvent themselves and adjust. And in 2022, we started seeing a twist to this one where individuals were, in the past, typically what would happen is someone would go to a bank and send funds via third-party deposit to an account somewhere across the country. What we're seeing now in 2022 was individuals actually attending the residence, presenting themselves as bail bondsmen or couriers picking up funds from the homes of typically elderly persons. So that is, we've seen a jump, as I said, right across the country. 2022 was a bad year. And again, the individuals are basically being told that a loved one is in custody, and the person presents themselves on the phone as either a bail bondsman or a lawyer or a police officer, and asks them to basically come up with the funds. And there's always this sort of sense of urgency to act, and the fraudsters are basically playing on emotions and concern that most people would have for their loved ones that would do anything for them to help them. So it's a very alarming and disturbing trend, and it has impacted many citizens across the Niagara region and into Fort Erie as well.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. And it's what's interesting about that is I asked you about, online fraud versus in person. And it sounds like some of these scams actually involve a bit of both potentially. It could be reaching out online or reaching out by phone and then actually sending somebody in person to go collect these funds.
Correct. Yes. The sort of introduction comes typically by phone, and they present a somewhat convincing story to someone who maybe not be totally familiar with how the process works. Obviously, to someone in law enforcement, the police would never be sending someone to your house to collect cash. They're using very common tactics in trying to create the sense of urgency, first of all, and secondly, not to reach out to anyone, to speak to anyone about the situation because there's some sort of a legal order or legal ban preventing them from sharing information with anybody. So.
Now, one of these types of scams that I've seen online, and I'm curious if you're seeing it here in Niagara already, is that with the development of AI technology, you can create these deep fakes of people's voices where, grandma receives a call and she thinks it legitimately is her grandson because they were able to so accurately duplicate that voice. Is that something that's happening here in Niagara?
So I know there has been some media attention. I believe there was, I don't want to quote what source it was because I'm not 100% certain, but someone had suggested that there's AI in place here. And my knowledge, we don't have any definitive proof of that being used. I've talked to many victims and have had similar stories where they swear that the voice is exactly that of their loved one. But again, we don't have any definitive proof of that. I think what I'm hearing in a lot of situations is there's always a twist in that the person is either saying that they have some sort of an injury or they have some sort of an illness, which is why sometimes their voice may not sound exactly the same, but enough to get them, get them thinking that it could potentially be them.
So these emergency scams, if we can call them that, I mean, this is the most common type of scam that you're seeing happening right now?
I mean, at the present moment, I wouldn't say it's one of the most common ones. I would say in 2022, it definitely was. But identity theft and identity fraud is a huge problem. Our information is just in so many places, and with a potential breach, your information could be shared without you being aware of it. And, before you know it, you start to realize that someone's using your personal information to obtain credit.
Now, in the fraud unit, I'm sure you're spending a lot of your time attempting to locate the perpetrators of these sorts of crimes. What if somebody is a victim of one of these types of scams, though, where they end up losing a significant amount of money? How often is it possible to actually recover some of those funds, or are the victims basically just out those funds at that point?
Well, again, it's kind of tough to speak in general terms about exactly what the chances of success are. An individual who attends your house to pick up cash, and it all depends on what sort of additional evidence we have to sort of connect them to other incidents. It's pretty tough to say that they'll always be out those funds, and in some situations where money is moved through bank accounts, sometimes there's a chance that we can recover it that way.
But I imagine that would be a pretty long and painstaking process in most cases.
Yes, it is. As I said before, the technology has provided us with lots of great opportunities for advancements, but it's also created opportunities for the criminal element to sort of strive and take advantage of people too.
Well, one of the a scam that I saw, and I spoke about this on the previous episode of the Fort Erie podcast, and I met with a couple of homeowners. As you may or may not know, that I'm a realtor outside of doing this podcast, and the way this scam works is it's a door-to-door type operation where, as this person or company offers this Go Green program, will install all kinds of new efficient stuff in your home, new efficient furnace, or so on and so forth, and you pay nothing for it. It's a provincial program, and what you actually end up, you sign the documents. What they're actually doing is registering a lien on your home, which is potentially the value of which is far greater than the work that was actually done. The worst case I saw from a homeowner I met with this past summer, they had about $30,000 worth of upgrades installed in their home, but the lien registered was for almost $240,000. Now, I came across just two homeowners here in town that had happened to. RCMP is investigating, but is this a widespread problem as well across Niagara? Are there a lot of these like title fraud type scams going on?
We do see a number of these types of complaints, and I would say that there are a variety of issues at hand that need to be dealt with. Again, door-to-door sales is obviously prevented in Ontario. They're not supposed to go door-to-door to sell these products. There's, Consumer Protection Ontario. I don't know if you've ever seen their information online, but there are certain laws under the Consumer Protection Act which sort of prevent them from doing that. However, a lot of the times it'll be prompted by a phone call, which then results in them being allowed or invited to come to the house to do an assessment. Now, from there on in, now you have other challenges that you're dealing with in terms of contracts or documents that are signed. This is the important piece where we try to educate the consumer that they should be very well aware of what they're signing and not feel any pressure to get involved into any of these long-term agreements. I think in a lot of situations, we then, and again, it's not to speak generally, but from what I'm seeing in a lot of the complaints, there is a lack of documentation that the consumer is able to provide. Signing a contract for a piece of equipment that has far greater value, let's say minimal payments. I guess you'll see that where there's minimal payments for the first couple of years, then they start to increase the payments with higher interest rates, and then these liens are subsequently registered on their homes. Well, I think that there's a lot of pressure right now on the provincial government to basically change, the ability to place liens on homes, especially when it comes to appliances, hot water tanks, air conditioners. It is really a very challenging legal issue, and in order to proceed through the fraud route, it has to show that this particular company or agency or individual is showing a pattern of doing that. Now, signing, as I said before, signing a long-term contract for an item which is priced higher than it would cost for you to go to Home Depot to purchase up front is a choice that someone makes. I guess you have to really be kind of aware of what you're signing and what you're authorizing somebody to do. Trying to revert that after the fact is always much more difficult, for sure.
What would you suggest for not just homeowners, but I mean the public at large in terms of safeguarding themselves? I mean, aside from, going through a contract with a fine-tooth comb, what other steps could people take to protect themselves against frauds and scams?
Well, I guess the informed person concerned, the informed consumer or individual should be very well aware of kind of what they're getting themselves into. Again, that would be the most general piece of advice. Don't feel an urgency, because with a lot of these fraudulent schemes, there's always that element that it's now or never. Now is the time to do it, and you shouldn't really ever feel that pressure to have to act quickly to do something. Consult with somebody different, obtain a second opinion, speak to other individuals who have had similar work done and get their opinion on it. Don't feel that pressure that you have to do something right away. That is a common theme in a lot of frauds, whether it be a contractor situation, whether it be a driveway, having your driveway redone. We've all seen the headlines on that. A lot of seniors are being targeted by, individuals that see that they need to have some renovations done on their house, and those renovations become, a lot. The price seems to increase after they've been there for a little bit of time, and I would say that was the most important thing you can do if you feel like you need to have some work done, or if you receive a call for something, that you kind of, pump the brakes and slow things down a little bit, and reach out to family members, reach out to a neighbor, reach out to somebody else to get another opinion before you actually decide to act on it.
I think that's good advice. And, with respect to like paving a driveway, for example, I just wanted to clarify something you'd said earlier. You'd mentioned that, certain types of door-to-door sales are illegal, which my understanding is that pertains to appliances like a hot water tank or a furnace.
Yep.
Is it legal for somebody to come to my door, though, and offer to pave my driveway or offer landscaping services? Those types of sales are still allowed, or no?
Absolutely. Anybody can approach your door in that situation. And as I said before, like if they want to offer you some sort of a service, cleaning service, even I noticed your roof needs to be repaired, or I noticed that your house is in some sort of need of work. Someone can come to your door and ask you, can I quote you on it? And you don't have to have them come and do it. You can actually, if you haven't called them and you don't feel comfortable with this individual, you would just turn them away and say, no, thank you. And ask them to sort of leave your property. The hook comes when you have allowed them sort of unsolicited, and they appear on your property to give you a quote on something. They haven't committed any offense by offering a service to you in that situation, whether it be landscaping, driveway, or painting. But you definitely have the right to sort of refuse and ask the person to leave your property, because sometimes they can be quite aggressive and pushy with what they want to offer.
Sure.
Again, they'll try to create that sense of urgency that you wouldn't want your house or your roof or your property to be damaged because of the shingles off of your roof. But you have the ability to ask them to not do anything further and to get off your property.
What should somebody do if it's past that point? They've agreed to a service or a contract or something or other, or maybe they've been involved in one of these emergency type scams. They say it's too late. I realize now that I've been defrauded. What are the next steps? What should they do now?
Well, we obviously ask that they report to us if they become the victim of one of these scams. Contact police. Collect as much information as you can. We see quite a range of information where some people have a notepad writing every single step down, and that they've been asked to do, recording phone numbers, recording times, recording all details. And then we see a range where someone just is relying on their memory, which in some situations can be quite poor. Mm-hmm. Again, documenting information is always the way to go in any sort of situation. That doesn't even necessarily need to be fraud. Even if you're having a history of bad relations with a neighbor and it's looking like it could be potentially something criminal, a well-documented diary of history and so on is a valuable piece of evidence, as opposed to your memory sometimes, which we can forget important details.
And what's the best way to report it? Is it to call, to go on the website, the Niagara Regional Police website? Go ahead.
Yeah, we recommend that you contact the Niagara Regional Police through our number 905-688-4111 and actually request that you'd like to report a criminal offense. And an officer will either attend or call to obtain the necessary information that we require to further the investigation.
Great. And is there anything else you'd like to share with listeners? Anything else they should know?
I guess the most important point that I would recommend, and it's kind of unfortunate, but if you receive sort of unsolicited phone calls or you have any question about who may be contacting you by telephone or by email, we sort of ask that you, again, slow things down a little bit, especially if the call is not, if you have not made the call, you never know who's calling you. There is technology out there which allows someone to spoof a telephone number, make it appear to be something other than what it actually is. I've actually seen it on someone's phone where it says, it lists the police number, 905-688-4111 on their display. The technology does exist for someone to spoof those numbers to make them seem legit. If you feel that you are, or even a bank, right? Someone may call. Everyone has received the spam calls where you claim that there's an unauthorized transaction on your credit card or on your account, and a lot of individuals will sort of unknowingly or without being aware of it provide information to suspects, which sort of helps them weave their story. We have also seen in some situations that people have allowed suspects to remote into their computers. And obviously by doing that, now you've allowed someone to basically see everything that's on your computer. Sometimes people will leave a banking browser open because they're the only one that uses their computer. You allow someone to install software onto your computer to remote in, and all of a sudden now they can see what your accounts are doing and can make transfers and make things happen or appear in your account that you're not aware of till after the fact.
So a good idea might be then if you were to receive a call from the bank, let's say you think it's the bank and they're calling about some unauthorized transaction, it'd be to simply hang up and call back the bank or call back the CRA or call back your grandson or whoever you think it is. You initiate the call to that number instead and make sure you're actually talking to somebody from the bank, the CRA, whatever the case may be.
Yep, that's 100% correct. I mean, you call the number you know to be the true number. As I said before, with the grandparent scam, a lot of the times they basically tell them, no, don't call mom or don't call dad because they can't know about this, and I don't want them to be aware of it. A lot of the times, if they just hang up and call that grandson, they would realize that this is in fact a total scam. We as a unit here, we've gone out to sort of work on keeping the bank informed and aware of what's happening as well, and to sort of question these transactions, to sort of prevent it from happening, because most times people are going to the bank to get this money out, right? So by informing the banks and making them more aware of what's happening, we've been able to sort of reduce the victimization in Niagara.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
Back in episode 69, during the opening monologue, which I titled Welcome to the No Information Age, I offered some criticism of the Online News Act. I referred to the Online News Act as Bill C-11, but that is in fact not the case. Bill C-11 is the Online Streaming Act. So my bad, folks. I made a mistake. The Online News Act is actually Bill C-18. A listener brought that to my attention this week. I don't imagine that any of you lost sleep over an oversight like that, but I just thought I would take a moment to correct my error. Anyway, let's talk about some Fort Erie history.
This month in Fort Erie history.
For this edition of This Month in Fort Erie History, I'm going to take you on a bit of a ride today, Fort Erie. We're going to go all over the place, but let's start here. Dufferin Electronics and TV. I don't know if you remember that name, if you recall that name, depending how long you've been here in town, but Dufferin Electronics and TV opened shop this month in Fort Erie history. That's 53 years ago, October 1970. And I found the photo of this storefront via the local history archive, which you can access through the Fort Erie Public Library. It appears that this store was set up at the corner of Dufferin and Clouk, so in the north end. Now, in and of itself, an electronics store opening up in our town, not really a story, but I couldn't find a whole lot of information about this store, if I'm being quite honest. If you have some information or some memories about Dufferin Electronics, call the Byrd Box, 289-599-2973. Leave a message and let me know. But I was fascinated by this because 1970, a little before my time, I was born in the 80s. So TVs I get. Okay, Dufferin Electronics sells TVs. They probably sold radios, but I started wondering, like back in 1970 or the early 1970s, what other types of consumer electronics did people get excited about? So I found this list, this article titled The 10 Most Desired Tech Gifts of the 1970s. And it goes year by year, ranking like the most popular tech Christmas gift that people wanted every year. So 1970, it was the Panasonic TR001 ICTV. It was one of the world's first pocket televisions. It had a kind of a weird oblong shape to it, a tiny square screen, and it could allegedly fit in your pocket if you had huge pockets. Or in this ad that I'm looking at, it could fit into a stocking. So, well, there you go. Stocking stuffer. You can get a portable TV, 1970. I didn't even know that was a thing, if I'm being honest. 1979, it was, or 1971, excuse me, it was a recordable 8-track system. 1972, it was the Philips N1500 video cassette recorder, I think what we just call a VCR today. 1973, it was the Kodak Pocket Instamatic 110, one of those like flat, wide cameras that were popularized in the 1970s. And by 1974, any guesses? The most popular tech Christmas gift for 1974 was the Hewlett-Packard HP 65. You bunch of nerds in the 1970s, the thing you wanted most for Christmas was a scientific calculator. I find that one funny, but I imagine these are all items that Dufferin Electronics probably carried at one point. And then I got to thinking, well, if they were selling these items, I wonder if they had any competition. Because today, when we think about electronics, we tend to think of like a big department store, like going to Best Buy, or maybe price shopping online and getting something from Amazon delivered to your house, or, you know, tech like an iPhone, you might go right to the Apple store. But back then, I was kind of thinking, you know, like the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, there were probably other little specialized mom and pop type electronic stores. So I jumped on the Fort Erie, I told you this was going to be an adventure today, guys. Stay with me. I jumped on the Fort Erie Collectibles Bob Frett's Collection Facebook group. Bob was my guest in the previous episode number 69, but I know he's got this very detailed collection of photographs online here where you can see items that are in his collection. And I found a receipt from 1965 for a place called Niagara TV Supply, and that was located at 458 Craft Road. So this is in Bob's collection, this receipt from 1965. So we know this place was open a full 5 years before Dufferin Electronics. Now the address, 458 Craft Road, that sounded familiar to me, and I couldn't put my finger on why till I did a quick search on Google Maps. And if you know this address, you know this address. I recognized it instantly. It's what I can only describe as like a residential compound. That property was actually on the market at one point, and I showed it. It was a very, very interesting place. If you know the place, you know the place. But anyway, another piece I found on Bob's collection, it was a photograph of an application to go to Domcraft Electronics School, and it's the same address, 458 Craft Road. So Now I'm in deep, okay? We're unraveling the history of electronics in Fort Erie here. So there's this huge property on Craft Road that houses not just an electronics store, but an electronics school. You could buy a TV or learn how to fix one, I guess. So I did another further search that led me to the Government of Canada publications. I found an old copy of the title here, like the front page says Directory of Private Business Colleges and Other Privately Owned Vocational Schools from 1965. How oddly specific. Anyway, down on page 15, Dom Craft Electronics School on Craft Road is listed there, founded in 1959. So here's the timeline. 1959, Dom Craft Electronics School opens up. Sometime right around then or thereabouts, Niagara TV Supply opened at that exact same location. We know it's opened by 1965 for sure because of the receipt in the Bob Fretz collection. And then this month in Fort Erie history, October 1970, Dufferin Electronics opens up in the North End to give this place a bit of competition. Now, I wonder at its peak, in Fort Erie's history, how many electronic stores were there at the most at one time? I'm curious. I'd like to know. Maybe all of you nerds who wanted scientific calculators for Christmas back in 1974, maybe you guys could count that one up for me.
Ranting and Raving on the Fort Erie Podcast.
If you are new to the Fort Erie Podcast, Ranting and Raving is the part of the show where I get things off my chest. And today's rant is all about the Buffalo Bills.
The Bills make me wanna shout, kick your heels up and shout, throw your hands up and shout, throw your head back and shout. Come on now, the Bills.
Yeah, the Bills make me want to shout. All right, that's that part's for sure. Look, I know talking about the Bills, this is sacred territory for some, and I'm going to try not to be too critical or say anything too crazy because I know Bills Mafia. They'll egg my house, they'll flatten my tires. So I'm going to try to tread carefully here. And I don't often talk about sports on the Fort Erie Podcast, and the main reason for that is recording times. So, for instance, at the time I'm recording this rant, we are 3 games into the regular NFL season. We had the absolute embarrassment of a season opener against the Jets, and then the subsequent domination of the Raiders and the Commanders weeks 2 and 3, respectively. The Bills-Dolphins matchup hasn't happened at the time I'm recording this, but the topic of this specific rant has less to do with the Bills and more to do with our beloved superstar quarterback, Josh Allen, who, by the way, I don't know if anyone else has ever noticed this, but certain photos, certain times, I don't know, man. Josh Allen kind of looks a lot to me like Tom DeLonge from Blink-182. I feel like there's like an uncanny resemblance there. But anyway, Sports Illustrated has Josh Allen ranked as the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL behind Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Probably fair. But and also in the final installment of the 2023 NFL Top 100, Josh Allen is listed as the number 8 overall player. It makes sure to mention here in the article, it says Allen threw for 4,283 yards and 35 touchdowns last season. But what they don't mention, the stat that they conveniently leave out is Josh Allen also had the most turnovers by a quarterback in 2022 with 19, a total of 19.
The Bills make me wanna shout.
And this is where my problem comes in with Josh Allen, because at his best, he is incredible to watch. His stats are great. He's fast. He's tough. He can be laser accurate, but he has all the qualities of a top quarterback except for one, in my opinion, the most important one, and that is consistency. I'm sure my friends group isn't the only one that, asks the same question before every game. I wonder which Josh Allen we're going to get today. Like, take that first game against the Jets, the season opener. The Jets, not a spectacular team by any stretch, but they had a shot this season of putting something together after acquiring Aaron Rodgers from the Packers back in April. Then, of course, as you probably already know, listener, 4 snaps in, Aaron Rodgers goes down with a torn Achilles. He's presumably out for the season, at the very least until the playoffs, which you think would have presented an outstanding opportunity for Josh Allen and the Bills to take down an otherwise lackluster team in a pretty spectacular fashion. But no, instead, we got embarrassment. And then the next 2 games, well, which Josh Allen do we get? Yeah, we got the guy we expected we'd see in game 1. It was an absolute massacre. That Washington game, by the end, I thought the refs would introduce like a mercy rule or something, like let the Commanders go home like you'd see in Little League.
Flawless victory.
The problem with Josh Allen is not talent. The problem is consistency. And I think if the Bills want a real shot at winning a Super Bowl, they might need to let go of good in pursuit of great. Because when you think of the greats, like the all-time greats, quarterbacks who led their squads to Super Bowl victories, you might think of names like Tom Brady or Joe Montana or Peyton Manning. Those guys might not always have been as exciting to watch as Josh Allen and the Bills, but they got the job done, and that's how the history books are going to remember them.
The Bills make me wanna.
You're listening to the Fort Erie Podcast.
Megan Muir from Muir Image Photography is on the phone. Meg, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. I'm happy you joined me today. I want to start by saying welcome to Ridgeway.
Yeah, thank you. We're so happy to be here. We love it.
How long ago was that you were in St. Catharines, you made the move to Ridgeway? How long ago was that?
December 21.
What brought you guys to Ridgeway?
Honestly, just where we were at in the market. So what we were looking for, Ridgeway just had what we were looking for. And then when we came to look at the house and took a drive through the community, we just fell in love, and it was an instant yes. I think we looked at the house and purchased it within less than 24 hours. So
wow.
We're happy to be here.
Wow. So what I mean, that Ridgeway has that effect on people, but what's some of your favorite stuff in town? Like, what do you like to do? Where do you like to go?
We got a dog when we moved here. It felt suitable. Everyone in Ridgeway has a dog, so we decided to get one. And our favorite thing to do is honestly just walk down the street to the beach, go into Ridgeway for a cup of coffee, go to Crystal Beach to the restaurant. We just absolutely love everything about this area. Our neighbors are fantastic. You know, people are always smiling and waving in the streets. Anyone listening to this is probably completely understands.
So how did you get into photography? That's obviously what we're going to talk about today, your business and what you're doing there. So why don't you give us a bit of your background? How did you end up doing what you're doing?
So it like most things in my life, it kind of just fell into place. I was in high school, and I went on a youth exchange program to New Brunswick. At this point, I think I was in grade 12. And, you know, the big question, who do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to do? I had no idea. And so I took this opportunity to do the youth exchange program in New Brunswick. I went with a friend of mine, and we went out there, and I took this picture, and it was the frame of a bunch of trees looking out over the ocean. And in that moment, something came over me, and I thought, hey, I can be a photographer for the rest of my life. This is what I can do. Prior to that, I had always been the one taking pictures at family events. My grandmother was big into photography. She always had her camera out, was always taking pictures of the family and Christmases and meals on the table. So I was always part of that and took after her in that way. But it was in that moment in New Brunswick where I took that picture and I thought, hey, I can do this. Came home, started researching programs, and just started learning everything I could. I bought a camera, and I thought I was going to be a National Geographic photographer and sit out in the woods and get the best shots ever. Fast forward to me not doing anything in the nature scene and being a wedding photographer.
Well, what kind of photography do you do then? Because you talked about, you know, National Geographic sitting in the, you know, what are your specialties?
So I do a whole variety of different styles of photography. I do weddings, I do couples and proposals, some engagements and proposals. I do a lot of family photography. That's one of my favorites. I do event photography, so big corporate events, birthday parties, kind of you name it, any live events I love to be a part of. I do interior and exterior, so for the real estate agents, for interior designers, construction companies, before and after photos. I kind of do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then most recently, what I'm making a big push for in my business is branding photography.
So can you elaborate on that? What's branding photography for the benefit of listeners?
Yeah. So for the way I describe it anyway, and how I would speak to my clients to say is any business, small business, to any large corporate businesses as well. I can take photos of products. I can take photos of the business owner themselves, and just a way to take photos so that you can have a professional presence online on your website so that you can attract clientele as well. So, yeah, like I said, from anything from product, the actual business owner themselves, to their location, to the interiors and exteriors of their business as well.
Well, that's excellent. And I know it's no secret that you and I have worked together in the past. You've done different things, family Christmas photos, my headshots on my business card. Kind of a funny story, I guess, for the benefit of listeners. I was in a bit of a crunch to get these photos done. And folks, don't put your photographers in a situation where they have to take like last minute photos. I mean, they'll do it, but I'm sure Meg will tell you it's not their first choice. And you ended up having me come to your living room in St. Catharines. And the headshot that's on my business card was actually taken in your living room in St. Catharines.
It can be done anywhere.
I mean, I'd like to think that's unique. You probably don't have people come to your living room all the time to get photos done, or do you? Is that something is that a service you offer?
No, it is very rare that I do that. It's so funny that you brought up that story, because actually recently I had somebody find me from the Fort Erie area, and same thing. She needed the photos, kind of needed a quick turnaround for something that she was doing. She needed the professional headshot, and I said, this isn't normally what I do, but you're welcome to come to my home, and I'll set up the studio backdrop and all the lighting equipment. And we did that, and it's still strange for me because it's my home, but we did that, and she absolutely loved the photos, and it was a great experience as far as I know. Not too many places in the Fort Erie area that offers that kind of type of studio environment. So we're actually in the work of building an at-home studio. So that's very exciting for us.
Oh, wow. So obviously for local businesses, if they wanted some of these branding shoots, I mean, you'd be going out on site for that, weddings on site. But for somebody who's looking for headshots, you could do something like that right in a home studio. Yes, exactly. And even branding, a lot of times people work from home, but they have small businesses. So you could bring your products to the studio, a lifestyle setup as well. So you can do your branding photography on site at the studio. But that could be down the road, but there's lots to come. One of the things that you're probably most famous for, I'll say, is I mentioned you did my family's Christmas photo last year. You do these holiday mini shoots. And, is that something you're going to be doing again this year? Yes, we are. We are working out location and dates, so those are to come. But if you were to follow me on social media, those dates will be released very, very soon. I know it's September, and I don't even want to be thinking about or talking about Christmas yet. However, the time is now, and we'll be putting out those dates very soon. And we'll be doing an indoor holiday mini set as well as an outdoor, more natural scene for our holiday minis this year. Well, it might still be the month of September that you and I are talking, but for listeners, they're actually catching this early October. It's possible you might already have some dates, times, locations available. You mentioned following you on social. Do you want to plug your handles? What, like Facebook, Instagram? Where are you? Where can people find you and see some of your work? Yeah, absolutely. So Facebook, it's Muir Image Photography. Muir is my last name, so that's MUIR. Same goes with Instagram. That's Muir Image Photography. And then the website is the same as well. A question I've always wanted to ask, and this is a photography-specific question. You mentioned how you fell in love with photography, buying a camera, doing some of the training that goes along with that. But it seems to me like there's an awful lot of people, and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the bus, but it seems to me like there's a lot of people who call themselves photographers who are maybe more like photo taking enthusiasts. What is the difference between a photographer and somebody who just really likes to take pictures? And could you speak to that at all? Yeah, I guess I could. I had a lot of things come up as you were saying that. First, and most importantly, I would say what I always tell everybody in my life. You'll see me come in with a professional camera and they'll step away with their iPhone. And I say, you know what? It's the capturing the moment that truly matters. So shoot away. Like, I'm not here to stop anyone from doing that. Continue to capture moments. But to answer your question, it would just really be the expertise in lighting, watching how light falls across somebody's face, watching how, using our proper lenses in certain situations to understand why we need to do that. I think, honestly, most importantly, as a photographer, it would be communication, understanding when somebody's not feeling comfortable. I always say I have multiple roles, and I almost feel like half the time I spend more time on the psychology of things rather than actually taking the picture. But you can't just pick up your camera and start taking pictures. It's true that you need to establish a rapport, and I think that took years for me to be confident in, and I think that's what's
most important and sets professionals apart from people who just, love taking photos. I myself am not very techy in the slightest. I will tell everybody that. This is no secret. I know what I know with my gear, and, settings with the actual camera and everything like that. But most importantly, it would be the communication with your clients and your subjects.
I'm happy you brought that up because I think I've previously mentioned your work, your services on the Fort Erie podcast, and having worked with you and then also having worked with other photographers, I've always said that probably your greatest strength is in making people feel comfortable. That's the sincere impression I've got every time that we've worked together, is that you're very good at making your subject feel comfortable working with you. There's a sense of trust there. And I feel like that's got to be an important factor to really get a high quality photo. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And I think that is true. Absolutely. I don't just pick up my camera and take a picture. That takes time. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right in saying that.
Yeah, it's that you said psychology is almost, you spend more time on that than actually taking the photo. And it just kind of made me chuckle because I go, it's so true, because there are some of those, I think of almost like photo day in school, right? When you were a little kid, it's like they weren't going for like the high quality shot here. It was just like, get the kid in the chair, get them out of the chair. And unfortunately, I think some photographers probably do run their business that way, where it's more volume than it actually is connecting with the client. Could you give, and I don't know, I understand everything you do is probably custom, but can you give somebody a sense of pricing? Like if they've maybe never had professional photography done and they go, hey, we'd like to do maybe a private outdoor shoot, like family shoot with Meg this fall. I mean, are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands? Like what does something like that cost?
Yeah, so kind of a starting rate would be $400 for a typical outdoor family session. It could be indoors, but yeah, $400 is kind of the starting rate for that. It includes the photos and our time together. But then I also offer the holiday minis. It's just a bit more of an affordable option. And also a lot of families choose to go that route if they have toddlers. And, the thought of an hour photo session just stresses them out. And those are usually around $250 for the holiday sessions, just depending on the location.
So that includes, the holiday minis, for example. And I know this, from previous experience, but for the benefit of listeners, they book this with you, and you're set up in a location so that you can kind of see multiple families in a day. It's less sort of set up and takedown time for you. And in exchange for something in the range of, say, $250, they're getting a collection of, I remember receiving dozens of photos that you'd professionally touched up, like everything looked awesome. Have I explained that right?
Yep, exactly. Some photographers choose to put a limit on their sessions and how many images they get. For me, when I'm photographing, a full session especially, I'm not just there to get pictures of, everyone looking at the camera and smiling and kind of doing that. I'm capturing the in-between moments. I'm capturing, a kid running away from their family and just, laughter, tears, maybe even the frustration of, the memories of the shoot itself. So I like to include all of those. I just say, you know what to expect when you're working with me. There's one set price. And then unless you're adding products, there's no additional fees. Your pictures, your digital images are included in the price that we discussed.
That's excellent. Okay. Now, if somebody wanted to book something custom with you, is the best way to reach you on social media? Or should they call you? Should they email you? How should they reach out?
So I would say to go onto my website. And earlier I said Muir Image Photography, but it's muirimagephoto.com. And there's a contact form. Just fill that out quickly. It gives you kind of a drop-down option of what it is that you're looking for. And that goes directly to through my website to my email. And then I'll have your contact information to get back to you that way. If you're on my social media, if you do send me a message there, that's great. But sometimes it's easier if it just comes through the contact form.
Is there anything else you want to share with listeners before we wrap up?
I think I'm so excited to be in the Fort Erie Ridgeway area. I'm so excited to support local. I have moved all of my business and all of the things that I do to this area. And now when I'm personally getting calls for people in our area, the first thing I ask is, where do you find me? Because I'm so happy that the local community has now found me and I can support and give back with my photography as well as supporting local businesses. So I would love to photograph and meet more families in the area. And I'm really excited to be here and to be able to do that.
Fort Erie job leads.
If you're on the hunt for a new job, Fort Erie, I hope one of these leads will point you in the right direction. Scuttlebutt Tap and Eatery in Stevensville, they're hiring part-time or full-time cooks, either or. You can message Scuttlebutt on Facebook to apply. The Plaice Bar and Grill on Garrison Road is also looking for cooks. To apply for that one, drop off a resume in person and ask to speak with Ken. The Barrel Restaurant is hiring for several different positions, including a delivery driver. That's a part-time position, $20 to $30 an hour. The hours do vary, and this is a contract position with a fixed term. CCTT, the new career college offering Sheridan programs in our town at the FIA campus on Tate. They're looking for a full-time and permanent student financial services specialist. This would be a day shift weekdays. MKS Fences and More is hiring a fence and deck installer. This is a 2-month contract position, $18 an hour, and a minimum of 1 year experience is required. Our recruiting firm here in town, Employment Professionals Canada, they're looking for an industrial electrician for installation, maintenance, and repair work. This position is permanent and full-time. Pay starts at $39.42 per hour. To apply for this one, call 905-684-8222 and ask for Pamela. Peninsula Plastics, probably better known to most of us as Penplast, they're advertising for a full-time permanent machine operator doing plastics processing. There are some benefits included with this position, but 1 to 2 years of experience are required. Nights in the motel, they're after a housekeeper. It's a full-time permanent position, housekeeping position, $16 to $17 an hour. Experience is an asset, but not required. You would need to start ASAP. You can apply for this one by emailing nightsinjob@gmail.com. The Commercial Roadhouse, just freshly reopened in Stevensville. They're hiring for multiple positions. One of those positions is a server/bartender. The scheduling is flexible. It says the pay is $15.50 an hour, but I'm guessing there's also tips. Tim Hortons at Garrison and Central, they're hiring team members. Scheduling there is flexible. The pay is minimum wage, but experience is not a requirement. And it says there may be growth opportunities as a trainer, supervisor, or other leadership positions. And lastly, I'll mention the Joe's Independent Grocer in Ridgeway. They need a full-time bakery manager. This would involve various different shifts, but it is a permanent position, requires 3 years of experience. There's no mention of pay in the job ad, but it does mention that you'd get a discount on groceries. And frankly, right now, that's worth quite a lot.
The Fort Erie Podcast.
It just occurs to me that earlier in the episode, I was going through some of the top tech gifts, top electronics that people wanted in the 1970s. And from 1970 to 1974, the 5 tech gifts that were most in demand, highest in demand at Christmas were a camera, a portable TV, a device that plays music, a device that plays movies, and a calculator. And what strikes me as odd is, imagine going back to the 1970s and explaining to people that all of those devices and more would be now contained in one single device in a modern smartphone. It's crazy. People used to own a different device for every one of these things. It's. I also remember, too, when I was a kid, teachers used to say things, if you tried to pull out a calculator when you were doing your math test, your teacher would say, you can't use a calculator. You have to know how to do the math manually, because when in your lifetime are you ever going to have a calculator just handy in your pocket? How times have changed. Anyway, speaking of time, it is my wife's birthday today. My wife, Andrea, if you want to drop her a line, some well wishes, she's at Online Drea, everywhere online. That's at Online DREA. She has a podcast too, if you want to check it out. It's all about social media marketing. It's called the Savvy Social Podcast. We like to rib each other a little bit sometimes, bit of gentle fun, because I don't catch every episode of her podcast and she doesn't catch every episode of mine. So just for kicks, my beloved wife, babe, if you're listening, I've hidden your birthday gift in the pantry downstairs. It's on the top shelf. And this is the only place that I'm going to announce its location on the Fort Erie podcast. So if you didn't tune in to today's new episode, who knows if you will if you will ever find your birthday gift. Anyway, that's the episode for today, folks. Thanks for listening. I've got a big announcement coming up on next week's episode number 71. I know I always say that. I know I always say there's a big announcement coming, and then you think I'm overhyping it. But when I say big this time, I mean it. I got a big announcement coming up on episode 71. You're not going to want to miss it. Teresa Murphy at Strong Fort Erie Neighborhoods will be joining me as my guest, and she's going to help me make that announcement. If you're not familiar, Strong Fort Erie Neighborhoods is a local network of over 70 volunteers with a focus on relieving poverty in our community. So please set an alarm on your phone or mark it in your calendar or something. Next Tuesday morning, the Fort Erie podcast, episode number 71. theforteeriepodcast.com. You can get it or subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Get your messages in on the Byrd Box, folks, 289-599-2973, and I will chat with you again soon.
You've been listening to the Fort Erie Podcast with your host, Brent Jones. Never miss an episode. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or visit theforteeriepodcast.com.